Hi guys, this is the fourth time recording a tokenomics video. I really liked the last one, but because I stood the iPad up on its head, Raoul didn't like it. He said the sound was all off. So we're going to give this one more shot, and hopefully this one makes its way to you over the weekend or by Monday. I want to talk to you about tokenomics because tokenomics are the most important thing in a protocol. So I've got a series of videos coming out. The first one's this tokenomics video. The second one is a development as a solution and as a service video. And then another one is on sort of front facing and what we expect the protocol to achieve over time. So the first one is tokenomics, as I said, and to me, it's the most important thing. It's what took me a long time to get to grips with the protocol, because it's the only time I'm going to mention other projects by name, but I think it's where other projects have sort of not taken into account the growth of a protocol and looked at it in the future. And then they have to make changes, whereas it should be baked into the protocol what changes are coming. So people should always be aware of where they stand within their own protocol. So basically how nodes work, which we all know from a node system, if we are a node system, is differently, and every node ecosystem is different. So Gala release a token sort of to their founders nodes based on sort of daily emissions. Then, you know, the people who own those founders nodes run services for Gala, and that's their reward for running Gala. When Strong launched, they were sort of launching as this node as a service where they would support other networks with infrastructure, and the reward would be sort of based on them sort of supporting other networks. Other nodes were pretty much just dApps which didn't sort of achieve anything apart from a reward, and to a certain extent we're similar to sort of that model where the nodes are pretty much a standalone service, so they're not going to provide an infrastructure support to any of the networks. They're not going to provide but they are going to provide a governance on the platform, and that's where we stand. Now, as protocols grow, emissions grow, because as node count grows, so I mean, if we started with 1,000 nodes, so at 0.1 emissions a day, we would ultimately have an emission of 100 tokens a day, which means that on the market, if everyone sold their tokens, then 10 nodes could be created every day. And that's not a big amount, but it is how things grow and where things grow from. So tight tokenomics is really important. But where other protocols have, in my opinion, gone wrong is that they haven't anticipated what happens when they reach a certain node number and emissions become too high, and then it dilutes the currency on the market or the token on the market, and then that's when things start to go really, really, really wrong. So Strong was absolutely fine up until it got to sort of like 200,000 nodes, and then when it started printing more than 2,000 tokens a day, 20,000 tokens a day in emissions, as well as NFT boosts and everything else. So it's probably, when it got to 200,000 nodes, it was probably in the range of sort of between 22,500 and 25,000 tokens a day. Now that's a lot of tokens coming onto the market, and they had the benefit of it being on the Ethereum chain, which was quite expensive to interact with. So sort of that amount didn't come onto the market every day because it was too expensive to claim, too expensive to sell. So people generally did it either once a week or once a month. And it kept their tokenomics pretty tight because it was an expensive protocol to interact with. And we're building on the AVAX chain, and it's a much cheaper chain to interact with. So we don't really have those problems. So other protocols have put in sliding claim taxes and things like that to try and replicate the cost of gas on the Ethereum network within a node protocol on a cheaper network. And we don't want to do that either, because we don't want to tax the users. We don't want to, so it's not our place to do that. And the one thing that our nodes will have is just a 24-hour claim timer, so you can only claim once a day, so you're not constantly interacting with the contract and constantly sort of, because it doesn't create a healthy ecosystem, but we feel once a day is absolutely fine. The tokenomics of any protocol should be baked into the protocol. So regardless of what other use cases we build on top of it as a community and as a company, when it gets to a certain point, the protocol should have the ability to look after itself. And this idea and this concept comes from the Bitcoin network. So because Bitcoin has a lot of mechanisms in place that actually help it sustain and help it survive. Because if everyone tried to mine Bitcoin, then it would just deplete. So it has this mechanism where if too many people try and mine it, the algorithms become harder and harder and harder. So it stays deterministic and it only releases those X amount of Bitcoins per block, sort of depending on where it's at in its life cycle, where it's at in its halving cycle, and all the rest of it. And then it also has the halving cycle, where every sort of like 4 years at a deterministic block, which is known to everybody, when it reaches this block, it's actually going to halve its rewards. And that allows miners to prepare, and it allows them to gear up with their software, gear up with their hardware, to become more competitive for the next sort of 4-year cycle. And that's why you get a lot of this changing GPUs, changing rigs, changing or increasing the mining capacity of the mining farm, because that helps the protocol sustain, because it helps those miners prepare for what is coming. Now, we've taken that concept and we've applied it to our node platform, because we know that when it reaches a certain point and as it grows, emissions will become an issue. And we don't want emissions to primarily become an issue. So we have to have use cases as well as this sort of protection method. Now, in future videos, I'm going to talk about other use cases for tokens and what we can add and what we can do as a development service. But in this video, I just want to talk about the tokenomics of the project and what that does to help sustain itself. So our tokenomics are very simple. So we go through halving cycles every time our node count doubles. So from 0 to 200,000 nodes, our nodes will release 0.1 tokens per day. And then when we get to 200,000 nodes, our nodes will release 0.05 tokens a day. And then when we get to 400,000 nodes, our nodes will release 0.025 tokens a day. And then when we get to 800,000 nodes, our nodes will release 0.0125 tokens a day. And what this actually does is, yes, we are reducing nodes over time, but every other halving cycle, the cost of a node comes down, and every other halving cycle, the maintenance fees on the nodes come down as well. So the cost to maintain the nodes reduces, the cost to buy the node reduces, and your rewards reduce sort of incoherently with that model. But I'm going to say this is really important now, because this is a really important but. For the first time in the node protocols, in any one that I can see, so other ones have gone through mass changes recently when their emissions have become an issue, and it comes as a surprise to the users. So recently, Strong basically just said, right, once your nodes have produced 20 Strong tokens, which takes, I think, is it 200 days? It takes 200 days for a node to produce 20 tokens, roughly, on the Ethereum network. Those nodes just become useless, they die. So they will never produce any more emissions. Now, that wasn't advertised to Strong users at the start. So they built this base of 300,000 nodes, and then they have effectively just taken those nodes away from their users. Now, they had to do this because they ran into the problem of emissions. So the only way that they could actually counteract that would be to reduce the emissions, but they were too far gone to reduce the emissions because they reached 500,000 nodes. So they're primarily printing probably between 50 and 60,000 tokens a day across their product suite. And even halving them would still be producing 30,000 tokens a day, which is still too high. And then you've got new nodes coming on top of it. So it's just this ever expanding yield curve of emissions, which won't work. Other protocols have sort of baited in with I'm not going to say baited in, because I think that's unfair. So they've launched with higher emissions, and then as the protocol has grown, whether it's grown more quickly than the developers realized, or whether it's grown, or whether it was done purposely to actually get people to come into the protocol knowing that it wouldn't actually sustain, which we call bait and switch in sort of like this model and this method. It's really unsustainable, because it comes as a surprise to the users again. So they buy a node with the promise of like over one whole token a day in emissions, and then by the time it gets to 20 or 30,000 nodes on the protocol, which isn't a great amount of nodes, all of a sudden the devs realize that, okay, we've got emissions of 35,000 tokens a day, and the market can't sustain those emissions. So again, the next thing that they do is take it all back. So they start to wind their emissions back and reduce the rewards, which again angers the community. And we want to be like this fully transparent and this self-sustaining node ecosystem from the get-go. So we've done things very differently. So our users know that when they buy their node, they know exactly what point that those emissions are going to reduce. And they also know that they can actually prepare for that. So as opposed to you buying one node and hoping that that node's going to pay you 0.1 forever, you know that that node's going to reduce its rewards. And you know that if you want to maintain your reward of 0.1 tokens a day, that you have to grow your node count. So our protocol allows people to grow with it. So we have no max cap on our nodes. We have a max earning to minimize people with more money, because we feel that's important as well, which I'll go into in a minute. But ultimately, if you start with, let's say you've taken a position in the pre-sale of 10 nodes, so you're earning one full token a day, you know that by the time we get to 200,000 nodes, if you want to carry on earning one full token a day, you're going to have to grow your node count by 10 nodes over that period of 200,000 nodes. So by the time we get to 200,000 nodes, in order for you to maintain your one token a day emission, you're going to have 20 nodes. Now, the life cycle of the node system easily allows that. If you're earning a token a day, you're earning 7 tokens a week. So you're earning 28 tokens a month. So it allows you to compound some and to sell some over a 10-month period, where you can grow your node count and sort of like take some sort of enjoyment from the protocol as well. It's not like it's going to come as a surprise or a shock to anybody. Now, at the start, it doesn't matter how many nodes we launch with. At the moment, we're at 1,000, roughly 1,000, and we've got a pre-sale allocation of 20,000 nodes. So we know now that we're going to be producing between 100 and 2,000 tokens a day when we launch, depending on what the node count is when we launch. At 100 tokens a day, you can physically only make 10 nodes a day. So at 1,000 tokens a day, you can physically only make 100 nodes a day if everything comes onto the market, which it won't. Not everything is going to come onto the market every single day. So we've built this whole thing for this really slow, sustainable growth, where people can sort of join the project, can compound in the project, can take things from the project. And that whole tokenomic is designed for sustainability without any external use cases from the team and from the community. So when we start adding additional use cases, then it becomes an even tighter tokenomic, and the growth is even slower still. But hopefully sort of token metrics will come into play, and people will see much more benefit in being part of our ecosystem. So as I spoke to you earlier before about the max sort of tokens that you can take from our protocol every day, it is 4. So our pre-sale is for 40 nodes per address, and that gives people the ability to take 4 tokens a day. It's that simple. Now you can build nodes past 40 once we go live, but those nodes will not be active until we reach a halving cycle. So If you start with 40 and you know that by the time you get to 200,000 nodes, you need to have 80 nodes in your wallet, you can build those additional 40 nodes. You won't pay any maintenance fees on them whatsoever, but they won't actually do anything until we hit a halving cycle, whereas they will become active. So then you will have 80 active nodes producing 4 tokens a day. And again, then it's up to 160, and then it's an exponential sort of growth. But you can maintain that because that growth cycle becomes longer and longer and longer. And because the emissions will always be between 10,000 and 20,000 tokens a day, always. So as soon as we reach 100,000 nodes, the emissions will never go below 10,000 tokens a day, unless they become inactive. But the emissions will never go below 10,000, and they will never exceed 20,000. So the protocol will live in that range of between 10 and 20,000 tokens a day. And that range becomes bigger and bigger and bigger as the protocol grows. So the first 2 cycles are, yes, for 200,000 nodes, because 0 to 200,000 and then 200,000 to 400,000 are both double ups. But once we get to 400,000, you then have to wait until we get to 800,000 nodes before the next halving cycle. So it becomes longer. So that period doubles as well. And then when we get to 800,000, it's an 800,000 node gap to 1.6 million nodes. And again, that gap is considerably longer because it's 800,000, and those emissions are always between 1,000 and 2,000 tokens a day, which gives you 10,000 and 20,000 tokens a day, which gives you a max range, if everything's coming onto the market, of only creating between 1,000 and 2,000 nodes a day. So if you're looking at that gap from 400,000 to 800,000 at a minimum of 1,000 a day, it's going to be a minimum of between 300 and 400 days by the time you put that. So you have lots of time in between to sort of deploy whatever strategy you want to deploy. But it does give you that ability to grow with the protocol, which I think is really, really, really important. And you have no surprises in our protocol. It is known from day one that this is going to happen. And you, as a user, have a responsibility to maintain, and that's what our protocol is all about. We don't want sort of to grow beyond a point, but we do want to grow sort of with. So we want all of our users to be able to grow as we grow, but we do not want them to grow past what we can sustain as a protocol. And we don't want them to grow past what we can build as additional use cases as well. So we want this really healthy ecosystem and this really healthy balance. But more to the point, we want a really strong community that don't get any surprises, don't get the rug pulled over their eyes, and don't get this whole, okay, well, we can't do this and we can't sustain this and this is happening and that's happening. We don't want any of the old models that we've seen in the node landscape, and we don't want any of the changes that we've seen in the old landscape as far as the protocol is concerned. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't build additional use cases for our token as a community, as a company, as a development team, whatever you want to. We can build additional use cases together that create more demand for the token past just building a node, which will benefit the node ecosystem greatly. And we can build and we can sort of develop with other projects and other protocols, and we can do lots as a development suite, which I'm going to go into our next video. But we have to have this strong base from the start, that we know what we're going to have to do and we know what's expected of us as users, as opposed to just saying when team. The responsibility is actually on you to grow with the actual protocol, as well as for the protocol to deliver what it says it's going to deliver. And that's exactly what the protocol is going to deliver. To you as a node owner, the protocol will deliver those tokens to the tokenomics model that is baked into it. So it's always going to go through these halving cycles. It's always going to look after itself on an emission point. So if more and more people get into it, if the node becomes cheaper and more people buy and more people compound and more people have active nodes, then the protocol is going to look at itself and think, oh, okay, my emissions are getting too high. I'm going to reach this point and I'm going to halve my emissions, and then we're going to start that life cycle all over again. And to me, it was a healthy solution to an emissions problem that is in the node space, because it allows you to maintain, as opposed to the whole greed and fear factor, which comes into play a lot in tokenomics. And it allows you just to grow and to see where everything's at and to keep an eye on everything and to look after and to be part of the community. And that's the important thing for us as a team when we sort of built and designed the tokenomics model. So it's really simple. I'm just going to reiterate it just at the end so you get an idea. So phase 1 of our tokenomics model is 0 to 200,000 nodes, and that will give you 0.1 tokens a day. Phase 2 is 200,000 to 400,000 nodes. That will give you 0.05 tokens a day. Phase 3 is 400,000 to 800,000, which will give you 0.025 tokens a day. Phase 4 is 800,000 to 1.6 million nodes, which will give you 0.0125 tokens a day, etc., etc., etc. And it will just keep going and going and going until it reaches whatever. But we're talking years and years and years into the future, and that doesn't really matter. So the main thing was to concentrate for the first 24 to 36 months and to create this really stable 24 to 36 months, which allows us to grow and to build and to create multiple use cases and to have the tokenomics look after themselves without a demand from the team and with some responsibility for the first time on the user as well. So because these are, responsibilities, it isn't just on us, it's on you as well. So you can see what's happening. You have to grow with it, whether you start with 1 node or you start with 40 nodes. So you know that when you get to a certain point, to maintain that reward, you're going to have to grow. And we want to grow with you, and we want you to grow with us. So I hope this has clarified some of the sort of tokenomics of the model and why we've done it. And I look forward to giving you the development as a service video in the coming days. And we've got other stuff coming from Jane and from Raoul and all the rest of it. Development has commenced on front end and back ends. That started last week. And really excited about sort of working through everything. At the moment, solving gas fees and stuff like that on the front end and the back end. And we will keep you all updated with that as that goes along. Raoul will probably be releasing sort of videos on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to explain what's happening with the build and to sort of keep everybody updated on that. In the meantime, so it's down to us as a community to spread the word, and it's down to us as a community to just build and build together and enjoy a protocol that we know is going to be relatively stable from the get-go with no hidden surprises. So take care, and I'll speak to you soon.